So when I first started teaching, I really wasn't that focused on accessibility. I heard people talking about it and I thought, well, if I ever have a deaf or a blind student, I'll worry about it then. But what I've learned over time is that that's just not an appropriate approach, that we need to consider it from day one, because if that challenge arises at some point in time, it's a lot easier if you're prepared ahead of time than not. What I've discovered is that by preparing for that, you're also benefiting all your students, not just those with challenges. And we've all seen the buttons that open doors around campus, and they've got the big wheelchair logo on it. But that doesn't mean that only people in wheelchairs can use the button. In fact, lots of people do, including me from time to time. If I have a whole armful of books or something, I hit it with my elbow and bang, the door opens up. So there's a case where an abled person is benefiting from an accessibility accommodation. Another one that you're probably familiar with, I see people in airports using the wheelchair ramp all the time. If they've got one of those suitcases with wheels on it, it's just easier to drag it up the ramp than up the stairs or even the escalator. So those are benefits to everybody universally, whether they need them or not. And there's a word for that. It's called universal design. In learning, universal design means that all students are afforded equal opportunity to succeed. And of course, the key word here is all. But there's a difference between equality, equity, and accessibility. In our library, for instance, we've achieved equity for short people like me by using those little stools with wheels on it. And I can reach all the way up to the top bookshelf, and that's very helpful. But why do we need to worry about it? An important reason is because it's the law. And if you have a conversation with Sean Dermody, he will tell you about challenges in the past and what it's taken to address those challenges. Or if you just go to the ada.gov website, they have a whole section there on judgments and open cases, hundreds of them. And if you scroll through them, you'll notice that quite a few are for educational institutions, both K through 12 and higher education. So from a liability standpoint, it's an important thing to address. But also, it's just the right thing to do. As human beings, most of us agree that we have a certain responsibility to accommodate our fellow humans, but certainly in our schools and our places of business. So what does accessibility and course content actually mean? You know, in this day and age where we are adding a lot of videos, they're supposed to be captioned, whether that's in a classroom or online. Now, we in the TEL department can help you with that to some degree. If it's original video, we can show you how to upload it to your YouTube channels, and it will automatically generate subtitles and a transcript. Depending on your accent, it can be pretty accurate or it might not be. Whenever I do one, it seems to confuse whether I'm saying THAN or THEN. But it's actually fairly easy to edit the transcript. And again, we can show you how to do that if that's the way you choose to go. You can also use Zoom, and that will record with a transcript. There's some processes you have to go through with Zoom that make it a little less convenient, in my opinion, than using YouTube, but that's another option. Also, if you're in a live classroom and you're not using the projector for something else, you could just turn on a Zoom session and project it on the wall and use the live transcripts. This might be an approach if you had a student or a guest in class that has a hearing deficit. Again, the advantage for everybody on this is that you're recording the whole transcript. You're recording your lecture in writing, and you can always post that later on for everybody's benefit. Of course, if you do have a deaf student in your class, chances are they will have already identified with our Student Accessibility Services group, and they will have hired an ASL translator for your class. We've done it in the past. Hasn't happened in a few years, but that is an option as well. Another challenge that I've addressed very recently is with PDFs that people post. We have these great kick scanners in the library, and most departments have multi-use printer that can also scan documents. The issue with that is that unless you set it up to actually do an OCR scan, an optical character reading scan, while you're producing the document, you're just getting a collection of pictures of pages. And no text reader that I'm aware of can actually decipher the picture from the text. It's especially problematic if you have your settings so that you're recording in grayscale or color, because then the optical scanner has to decipher between the various shades of gray. And you can see, in fact, on my example here, that you can actually get bleed through from the opposite page. When you scan in pure black and white or bitmap, you just have black text on white. That's all you see, which makes it easier for the OCR scanner. Another issue, you can see Gary Kroll's thumbs down at the bottom of the page there, trying to hold the page down. And the left-hand page is going to come out not only skewed, which some OCR readers can do a pretty good job straightening out, but there's also a gray shadow running up through the middle of the page. Again, you wouldn't get that if it were bitmap scan instead. So these are considerations that you have to take into account. And the easiest method is to not bother scanning at all and find a digital version that already exists. That's also not foolproof. If any of you have downloaded articles from EBSCO, sometimes the text layer on those articles is not that great either. But those are the options. And Peter will tell you that your best bet is, if you can get a text edition of whatever article you're doing, just copy the text into a Moodle page. And because, as we'll discuss later on, Moodle does a pretty good job of making things accessible right from the start. And what about courses or programs that don't seem to lend themselves well to certain impairments? And I actually fielded a question about this from someone in our art department earlier this semester who said, why do I have to worry about Ally on my Moodle page? I teach illustration. I don't know if it was illustration, but some visual art. And I'm not going to have any blind students in my class. And that's an assumption that ADA would prefer or insist that we don't make. If a blind person chooses to take a course in illustration, that's their decision, and they shouldn't be discouraged by our not trying to accommodate them. And in fact, if you Google visual arts for the blind, you'll find quite a few very innovative programs out there, and a lot of museums that are catering to sightless people as well. And again, you have to realize that not everybody is totally blind. Some people perceive shadows, so that has to be considered. And it's not an argument that will hold water to just say, well, it's an art course, so I don't have to cater to blind people. It just won't work. But it can be tricky, and for help and advice with those sorts of challenges, please reach out to us and TEL, and also student accessibility services. We might be able to help and research. And personally, I love a challenge. So if I need to, I'm happy to work with anybody about those sorts of things. And speaking of resources, here's a list of the things that I'm most familiar with. Although if you just do a Google search on accessibility resources, you'll get a whole days of links to look at. But let's check out some of the stuff that we have available. First of all, Moodle itself is a great accessibility resource. It has been designed over the years to take accessibility into consideration. Those of you who've been here for a while will remember that about 4 years ago, I think it was, all of a sudden we had fewer options as far as the size of our text could be. And color was also reduced quite a bit. And those modifications on Moodle's part were in direct reaction to criticism that they had gotten from ADA interests about too much flexibility. So right now, if you choose one of those 5 text sizes, you've got ADA compliant text. And the same is true with the colors, except there's a little more thinking that has to happen in the colors. Obviously, if you were to put a light yellow text on a light blue background, it would be difficult for people, whether they have sight challenges or not, to differentiate those 2 colors from each other. So there's still some common sense that has to happen there as well. Also, just because Moodle gives you the option to make text different colors, we really shouldn't use that as the sole method of identifying various things. Some people use green for all their assignments and blue for all their discussion forums and red for their exams. Well, that's fine unless you're Tom Burrell, who's given me permission to tell you that he is colorblind. So there needs to be some sort of alternative method for him to identify those sorts of things on the page. So again, common sense needs to happen here. And again, that's why awareness is so important to me, because really we don't necessarily think of this stuff regularly. Also, Moodle is great when it comes to inserting images, because it won't let you insert an image unless you add a description, which will end up in the alt tag. An alt tag allows a screen reader to explain what the image is. It'll say photograph, and then it'll read the alt tag text. And there are times where if it's just a rule across the page, or maybe it's a logo that isn't important for the reader to know, you can just click, this is a decorative image. And then some text readers will actually read decorative image, others will just skip it. Either way, the sightless person is going to have the benefit of the description of the image in content. But there are times where Moodle lets us down, and that's mostly when we bring other media into Moodle. And I've discussed a little bit already about PDFs and Word documents as well. They can be made accessible, and we actually are working on a workshop for that and a couple videos to go through that process. And you may have seen this on your Moodle pages already. You'll see these little icons. It looks like a little speedometer gauge, and it goes from red to green depending on how accessible the document is. And right next to that, there's an A with a downward facing arrow. Well, first of all, you can relax that your students won't see whether your PDFs are accessible or not. I mean, ultimately they might, but they don't see this judgment by this algorithm that's checking out your work. All they see is the A with the downward facing arrow. And when they click on that, they actually see numerous choices of alternate formats from the PDF. And in my opinion, the most useful one in all of those is the audio format. They also have electronic braille. I don't know much about that. I want to learn more about that. But the audio format is actually great. And depending on how accessible that PDF is to start with, it can be a very useful document. When I was in my doctoral program, I was reading these really dense philosophers, Foucault, Derrida, and others, and I'd have to read paragraphs 5 or 6 times to begin to understand what they were trying to say. But I found that if I let the text reader read it to me while I was reading it, that would cut it down. So I'd only have to read each paragraph a couple times. So, as I said, it benefits everybody. It also makes it easy if you want to take notes while you're listening to it. So check this out. I think I've got audio turned on in Zoom here.
Title, Microsoft Word, Stuff Anthology.doc. Begin paragraph text, everything I've written until now 147. May 2003, a snapshot of Fidel Castro's perpetual politics and propaganda prowess. Begin heading level 3, April 20th, 2012. Begin numbered list with 2 items starting at 14. Item 14 of 15, the aftermath of September 11th.
Okay, I wanted to go just that far because once the reader said the date, it talked about a bulleted list or item list, something like that. And the problem is that there's this drop cap on the page, and it's trying to read that and it didn't know what to do. So they're not perfect. And actually this PDF came out as 100% accessible. So even though that's how Ally looked at it, there's still little work that I could do to make it totally accessible. But you can see the strength in having that sort of advantage to your students. So that's what students see. To help the instructor, though, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the left-hand column, you will see where you can run an accessibility report. This is just for you. Yes, administrators could run these on your page as well. The only administrators here are Peter, me, and Aaron. But number one, we don't have time, and we also don't have the authority to go in and look at your pages without your consent. So we're not going to run these reports. I am able to run a report for all of Moodle, which I plan to do. I ran one just when I took over as chair, and I intend to run another one at the end of the spring semester, hoping that accessibility generally has gotten a little better over time. But this is for your benefit, not mine. It will come up, and I'm using my page that I'm teaching this semester as an example, and you'll see that it's 94% compatible. Well, yippee, I should pat myself on the back. But the reason it is because most of my content is native to Moodle. And that 6% that isn't are probably PDFs and possibly some Word documents that I have on the site. The thing is, where I send people to read off my site, Ally isn't going to check that. So if I'm sending people to CIA.gov, I have to rely that the CIA is being accessible with their content. But that said, I've got one page with some sort of an issue, and then I've got 8 pages that are scoring low. So if I click on that start button where it says I have 8 pages, and the one slide that I didn't include was all 8 of the documents, but I chose one of those documents and I clicked on the start, and it's this "You're on Your Own" Bob Cratchit article. And what it brings up is a visual of the PDF itself, and then I can click on each item and it'll explain to me what the issue is and how to fix it. It doesn't actually allow you to fix it right there, so you have to kind of toggle between that and Adobe Acrobat, another workshop, another video that we're putting together that will help you with that. But the point is, this is how you would go in and do it. Seems like a lot of work. And it is, but if you use the same PDFs year after year, you only have to do it once. And we'll talk about the labor involved in here at the end of this, because understand that this is a work in progress. Everybody realizes this is a work in progress. If we were standing in front of a judge, that judge would want to see that we have a good faith effort in working toward compliance. It might not make us immune to any judgments, but it would certainly benefit in our favor. The Moodle site developers area, if you haven't been there recently, you should check it out. You can access it from your dashboard, and you will see that down the page a little ways, you'll find a section in accessibility. That is mainly pertaining to Moodle. However, I have been adding some videos at the bottom, and will continue to, that will help with other issues in accessibility. So please be sure to take a look at that. Also, don't hesitate to check out the TEL workshop page. The easiest way to find it is just search on TEL and then click on the workshop link. You'll not only find workshops there, but also office hours. And don't let the office hours scare you either. If you don't see a time that works for you, just reach out, just email us, and we'll find a time that's compatible to both of us. And also, don't be shy about calling up students' accessibility services. Most of the time, they get in touch with us to tell us that one of our students has an issue, and here's what we need to do to accommodate that. But they're also there to consult. So don't hesitate to call them. Sometimes they'll refer you to me, sometimes I'll refer you to them. And for a limited time only, we've secured another year's worth of free access to the DeCue University's accessibility library. These courses are really good, and you can get certificates for each course, but there's actually some total curricula. The one that is most popular right now is customer service from an accessibility perspective. It takes 4 courses to get through that one. It's most popular because at this moment, for a limited time only, I have 17 t-shirts left with this logo emblazoned on it. And if you were to finish one of these curricula and send me a copy of your certificate and your shirt size, I'll get you on the list. As soon as the printer delivers them, I will be doling them out. Also, let's not sell short the SUNY online course quality review rubric. This was put together years ago and has evolved over time. Right now, all the accessibility indicators are integrated with the rest of the page. But in these days, most of us are teaching a hybrid kind of format. Even if we're face-to-face, we're directing our students back to a Moodle page that has a lot of content on it. So most everything in this rubric still applies. And if you're interested in checking out your course based on the rubric, give me a call or an email, because I actually can set you up with your own Google Forms-based rubric. And you can go through and check off items. And as you do, you get little blurbs that are helpful ways to solve whatever issues you come up with. And finally, if you happen to be teaching for SUNY Online, you also have access to their help desk. And they are much more able to address questions specific to Blackboard. So one final word on this: compliance is a moving target, and it's our good faith effort in working toward 100% accessibility that's critical.